Morning Glory, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt with a week in review show that could span a week itself rather than just 30 minutes. But to break it down, I'm going to go with four of the best in the Beltway. Sahil Kapur of Bloomberg, Courtney Kube of NBC News, where she covers the Pentagon and national security issues, Elana Schor of Politico, and Eugene Scott of the Washington Post. Before I go to the biggest stories of the week, Courtney, because John McCain is on the mind of so many, I wear my Naval Academy tie for that class of 58 graduate. What is his legacy at the Pentagon going to be?
Tough, very tough-minded, well-respected. He did not give leadership, whether you're in uniform or whether you were a political leader in the Pentagon. When you faced down against John McCain in the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, you knew that you were going to have a tough time. He's been a fierce and a staunch military supporter, of course. He had nearly 3 decades in the Navy. Everyone knows his tremendous legacy, where he was held in just absolutely horrific conditions in Vietnam for 5 years and was a war hero, and then went on, of course, to serve for 3 decades in the Senate and as a political leader. But people in the Pentagon, you know, he was a force and has been a force to be reckoned with. And to this day, despite the fact he's not been actually in his Senate office for several months now, as he continues to battle this terrible cancer, people still talk about his influence and decision-making that is made around how will John McCain respond to that.
Isn't that amazing? What a legacy. Eugene Scott, let's go to you for Story of the Week. What is your first story of the week?
My first story of the week is the fact that the National Day of Prayer had this huge cloud over it, thanks to the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, talking about something that many white evangelicals supporting Trump probably didn't want to have on the top of their minds. The fact that the president perhaps was very involved and aware of the payment to an adult film star that he allegedly was having an affair with shortly after the birth of his child.
Yeah, David French at National Review has issued a sort of an essay and a demand on all evangelicals to assess their belief in the context of this. There's a lot of complicated stuff about that in Selena Zito's new book, but you're right, that put the National Day of Prayer on a different setting than it has ever been before. Elana Schor, what's your best story of the week?
Well, I have to say, I chose the same story of the week. These were pretty explosive comments by Rudy Giuliani. But as a Senate reporter, what I'm wondering about is how Democrats treat this. Because I found it very interesting that Democrats have avoided talking about Stormy Daniels. They want to let the president get in his own way. And the question is, how long can they keep that up? It's a fascinating case of, in this very resistance-prone era, can they stay silent? I mean, because I think they should keep resisting the temptation.
Well, if they run on impeachment, they will lose. They don't really want to run on impeachment, but they're going to end up having to. Sahil Kapur, what say you for your story of the week?
Hugh, I'm going to go one bigger and say the biggest story of the entire Trump presidency is the courts. The president has confirmed 15 judges to the appellate courts, which, as you well know, have the last word on the vast majority of matters of law. Half of them are in their 40s. The other half are in their 50s. They're going to be lifetime appointed. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, has set the stage for 6 more coming up. These are staunch conservatives in the mold of the Federalist Society that want to dramatically limit what kinds of powers the federal government can assert under the Constitution. This is going to have a huge, huge impact on the law for generations to come.
You know, Sahil, after you wrote that story, I had Leader McConnell on my radio show this week, and I did the research. President Obama appointed 49 appeals court justices over 8 years. By the end of this year, it's going to be at least 25, and it might be as many as 40 appeals court judges for President Trump in 1 year, in 1 2-year term, as opposed to 8 years with President Obama. So he's moving at the speed of light compared with previous presidents. George W. Bush had about 60. Bill Clinton had about 61. President Obama, over 8 years, had 49. So you're absolutely right. It's dazzling. Courtney, back to you. I didn't give you a chance to do your story of the week because I asked you to reflect on Senator McCain. What is your story of the week?
So mine is one that got very little attention domestically, but it's Afghanistan. Earlier this week, there was a terrible terrorist attack. There was a suicide attack in Kabul, in the Green Zone. There was a secondary attack that targeted the journalists there. 9 journalists were killed, and I would bet that most people in America didn't even know that that happened. No. On the same day, there was another journalist, someone who's working for the BBC, who was shot dead outside of Kabul as well. And that all came on the same day, where an American soldier was killed in combat by small arms fire. A 22-year-old Army specialist named Gabriel Kandi, who was 5 years old on 9/11, was killed in Afghanistan this week.
ISIS also conducted a massacre in a little village outside of Baghdad that had previously thought to have been under the protection of the Iraqi forces. So ISIS remains a menace on these places. So we have a very great bifurcation here. The salaciousness of the Stormy Daniels story, Elana, and the reality of the world, whether we're talking about judges or Afghanistan. How does the news media cope with basically a bifurcated approach to the world?
Well, it's tricky. I think lawmakers face the same tension, honestly, Hugh. I mean, there's this Russia probe that simmers in the background, and it's constantly distracting, in some ways, us in the media from these bigger stories, like Afghanistan, like North Korea, where, you know, the president is verging on some pretty significant potential talks. So I would say it's a constant source of tension and stress. Sometimes we manage it well by juggling, and sometimes, frankly, we don't, and neither do lawmakers.
And Eugene, and when you attack the fix for the Post, when you write for the fix, do you have a narrow lane, or do you have to just go wherever the news goes? Do you want to go back to the lane? In my radio show, I got 3 hours, so I can cover it all, but sometimes you don't get that much time.
You don't, and you have to go where the news goes. And very often, what I think I'm writing about in the morning changes by noon, and then again by 4 or 5. And I mean, that's the new norm for this current administration. And whether or not readers and viewers are adjusting to that, we don't completely know yet. Much that everyone needs to be paying attention to.
Sahil, how frustrating is it when you write that great piece with your colleague about the judges? And it's really the biggest story, because those people are going to serve 40 and 50 years, and they issue about 3,000 opinions per year per circuit, and yet it gets swallowed up in Rudy and Stormy, the president on the tarmac. I mean, how frustrating is that?
Hugh, it's very frustrating as a reporter who's trying to cover that issue, because it's so consequential to the country, yet it's also equally unsexy, and it's difficult to get people's attention in a world where, you know, revelations like what you're talking about with Stormy Daniels, the Russia investigation, the chaos that's emanating on a daily basis from the White House are dominating the headlines. This is one of those long-term issues that's extremely consequential, but it doesn't quite get the oxygen that I think it deserves.
Well, I cover it every day. Every single day I cover judges, so you at least got an audience of one out there, Sahil. When we come back, though, we will take a wider angle and ask ourselves, who is the most important person this week not named Trump? Stay tuned.